And the biggest issue that we've gotten is when the coaches aren't patient with him, because they just automatically expect that he's going to be at par with everybody else when he gets to the team, whether it's basketball or going from basketball to baseball. And he's usually a couple weeks behind these kids because he hasn't picked up a baseball and a baseball bat, or he hasn't picked up a basketball because he's been playing football. And they take it out on him. Like it's, you're the problem, or you're negatively looked at because you play multiple sports compared to these kids that only play one sport. And I've had to have conversations with these coaches that that's not okay. You can't treat kids like this just because they like to do other sports. And the more patience and more understanding that these coaches are, that, hey, if you just help them and bring them along for a couple weeks, they'll end up being as good or better than everybody else. So just give them some time and work with them a little bit, instead of taking the approach that they're the bad kid because they came a couple weeks late. Like, that's just not the right approach. And so I've had to deal with that a little bit on that end, but it's not easy. I'm being honest on that end. Like,
I get it.
To navigate and to try to do what's best for your children, but also supporting them and giving them the most opportunities. It's a fine line, and you're constantly learning and figuring it out.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it leads to another whole, I don't want to say issue, but just a whole nother conversation for families and coaches to have, similar to what you're just laying out there is a little bit of pressure then, where even if you don't want your child to play year-round sports or competitive, the struggle that we see here locally is there's really two options. You play seasonal sports, and it's some sort of rec association or some sort of church league where it's not great. And it's great for some kids, but if you have a child who wants to be more competitive and wants to play against better competition and really challenge themselves, that's not the answer. But then to your point, if you do go to try to go to a travel basketball or a travel girls soccer or a competitive baseball team, if you're not willing to do it 12 months a year, they either don't want you, or you can't keep up with those kids just because they're doing it year round. When you're off playing football in the fall, they're playing 25 baseball games. Or if you're playing summer baseball, maybe the football team's already started summer conditioning. So what happens is, and I find it happening to a lot of our families, and my wife and I even feel the pressure in this regard, is there's like a keeping up with the Joneses aspect to it, where if we don't want to do it, but if you don't, you get left behind, right? And that's the fear, is none of us want your child to not have the best situation what's in their best interest. But you're in this dance where it's like, this is how we want to approach it. But if nobody else in town approaches it that way, we're like on this island where there is no solution. There is no competitive seasonal sports. It's seasonal rec level, or it's year-round travel competitive. There's no in between. At least we haven't found a great solution here in any sport locally. And to hear you kind of lay out a very similar, similar internal dialogue I think is super interesting.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think that's okay. Honestly, I think it's okay that if your kid just plays rec league and continues to move around and change up sports and gets into high school, I mean, that's okay. And on the flip side, we've been fortunate enough that I've had, he plays on a travel ball basketball team right now. And the coach is on the other side of the spectrum, where knows the situation that Gage is in. He knows that Gage plays football, and then he'll probably won't come to the team till December. And he works him in, and he plays till about March, and then he'll moves on to baseball. And he's okay with that. And he likes that because he loves the fact that Gage brings a lot to the squad. He's competitive. He works hard. He's a leader. Like, those are the things you want on your team. And, but that doesn't work for everybody. And not a lot of coaches are like that. They're very stubborn of what they think and how they run their programs and this and that. And rightfully so. Like, I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong, but I just know that in the long run, doing multiple sports is great and beneficial for the mind and the body for your kids. how they learn to be a teammate in different sports, their body movements in multiple sports compared to just the same movements of the same sport. I fully believe that moving your body and doing different sports and learning to be a different teammate in those sports, right? Being a teammate in basketball is completely different than being a teammate in football, right? There's one guy or two guys that can dominate on the basketball court, and the other guys are just role players. The football field, you need all 11, right? You need all 22, you need all 45, whatever that number is, right? It's a completely different aspect of that team and how you are as a teammate and how you work and the movements compared to those two. And then you move on to baseball, which is the same thing.